gjorde det mest for ligesom at skabe noget, der ikke var der, ikke? Men der var noget, folk havde brug for, ikke? Det er sådan lidt mærkeligt ting. Selvom vi havde brug for penge, men vi solgte ikke tøjet. Det er meget arbejde. Det er bare på en anden måde, ligesom vi har bare ikke siddet i studio og lavet tøj, sådan vi har bare brugt tiden på en anden måde, ikke? Vi har bare levet om natten, morgenfest, forstår du?
When we talk about success stories, men from the hood who ended up dominating runways, people like Kanye West, Kanye's founder Carl Williams, and others that comes to mind. But today I want to talk about the Danish version of that story. This is a brand that started as a hoodie, worn at the time by the hottest Danish rappers. And it wasn't just another streetwear brand with a logo. It was a brand with a message, a political standpoint, and a story that caught the attention of American Vogue and international media. And whenever a Danish brand gains that kind of attention outside of its borders, it means they're doing something different, something that cannot be ignored. All of that for it to then be shut down due to bankruptcy in 2021. This is the story of the brand that was Mufti, a brand I used to eye, a brand that stood out from everything else around it, and is a significant part of the Danish fashion history in the 2010s. It dominated, it created its own path, and it did it entirely on its own terms. Mufti was founded by Reza, an Iranian man who came to Denmark at the age of 6 with his family, growing up in some of Copenhagen's roughest neighborhoods, Nørrebro and Brøndby Strand. Areas that shaped him in ways that would eventually define everything about the brand he built. As an Iranian man growing up in Denmark, he and his friends faced challenges rooted in stereotypical views and stigmas. Outside nightclubs, outside events, they were turned away, rejected at the door of places that were playing their friends' music. And there's one story that Reza has told that I think captures exactly what that felt like. When Siva started breaking through with his hit song Derude, which became a massive hit almost overnight. The two of them went out one evening to get into a club called Sunday, the same club where Sivas had performed a concert just the weekend before. They were turned away at the door. They stood there, literally queuing outside the club where you could hear Sivas music playing inside as they still couldn't get in. That moment, standing outside the door, hearing your friend's music on the other side, and being told you do not belong, that is where Mufti comes from. Not just from a vision or a love of fashion, but from that specific feeling of being looked at and immediately dismissed. But that experience didn't make him give up. It made him think.
Da vi blev afvist, jeg tænkte, det var det, der jeg tror, der gjorde det. Det var ikke fordi, vi skulle lave tøj. Det var i stedet bare sådan noget, jeg tænkte, vi skal sætte de der på plads. Forstår du? De fucker med os på den der måde, ikke? Selvfølgelig, det er min livsstil, ikke min hobby. Panorama, udsigt, lad mit fjender vende i lobby.
At some point, Reza and his friends discovered that a trench coat worked like an invisible cloak on the club's pickers. The people who decide who gets in and who doesn't. The moment you put one on, suddenly you were okay, suddenly you belong. So they got hold of one trench coat between all of them. One person would get in, a girl would walk out and pass the trench coat along, and one by one all the boys would make their way inside wearing the same coat. Once they were in, nobody could say anything about the tracksuit. That image, a group of friends sharing one trench coat, passing it back and forth outside a nightclub just to get through a door. That is not just a funny story, that is the entire philosophy of Mufti in one moment. The idea that style could be a key, that the right piece of clothing could open a door that would otherwise stay shut, that what you wear has power, real, tangible power over how the world treats you. And shortly after that night, Reza began experimenting seriously with clothes and style, and not long after that, Mufti was born. He even named one of his early collections after that experience, calling it BK Comment. Translated, we cannot get in. It wasn't just a collection name, it was a statement about everything he had lived through. That challenge became the fuel for something much bigger. To understand the success of the brand, we need to go all the way back to the beginning of 2014, and the brand did not have a soft launch. It was big from the start. Reza had strong ties to the Danish music industry, and in particular to one rising rapper, Sivas. They were friends. Reza had been styling Sivas for his tours and music videos, and when looks were being put together, he saw an opportunity. He started putting Sivas in Mufti clothing, and the timing could not have been better. Siva had broken through with his hit song Derude in 2013, one of the biggest Danish songs of that period, and the momentum was still carrying into the following year. Having that kind of a visibility for a brand that hadn't even launched publicly yet was not an accident. It was a tactically smart and deliberate move to build hype before anyone even knew what they were buying into. And I can vividly remember this era. Getting hold of one of those hoodies was not easy, and that was very much part of the plan. The exposure worked. People from the industry took notice, and soon after that, attendees at Copenhagen Fashion Week were being photographed in mufti bomber jackets. The oversized Family for Para jackets, translated Family Before Para, a reference to the gang banditos, became the most photographed pieces at the entire Fashion Week. The editors of Custom and Women were wearing them, and almost immediately after those images spread on social media, American Vogue called. The street style photographer had captured the jackets, and they wanted to know, what is mufti? That moment right there, an Iranian man from the ghettos of Copenhagen getting a call from American Vogue because of his bomber jackets had taken over Copenhagen Fashion Week, is the kind of story that reminds you what fashion is actually capable of when it comes from a real place. And Reza kept pushing. Young Thug visited Copenhagen, and the concert organizers asked Reza to make something for the American rapper. Young Thug loved the dress-like suit Reza had created for him in wetsuit material. It ended in a wild night in Young Thug's suite. That's the kind of cultural currency that money cannot buy. That's what authenticity does. And his ability to find inspiration in the most unexpected places never stopped. At some point, Reza launched a collaboration with Just Eat, and the inspiration behind it was his own teenage years working as a pizza delivery boy. As he put it himself, I was 16, surrounded by the pizza shop owners who were the coolest people in the world I grew up in. They had money, they wore the best clothes, and drove the wildest cars in the city. So he took that memory, put a picture bag on the jacket, and made it fashion. That is the kind of creative thinking that cannot be taught. But the logo collaboration didn't stop there. Reza had a habit of taking the logos of iconic Danish companies and turning them into fashion statements. Carlsberg, Transport, and eventually Mask. The approach was directly inspired by the way the brands like Vitamins and Supreme had turned everyday corporate logos into cultural currency. But for Reza, it went deeper than just aesthetic. The Mask logo in particular came with a whole story behind it. The design was originally inspired by the Somali flag, because as Reza explained, he wanted to highlight countries that are never represented in the fashion world. But he was also very aware that it could be confused with the Mask logo, and that was intentional too. Somalia and Mask are deeply connected, he said. There was something political in that overlap, and Mask, as one of the most respected and globally recognized Danish brands, also simply appealed to him as a symbol of scale and ambition. Mask noticed, especially after Kendrick Lamar was photographed wearing the sweatshirt during his European tour in Berlin. Reza received a letter from Mask's legal team telling him he had infringed the rights. His reaction? He forwarded it straight to his lawyer without finishing reading it. When the lawyer called back, he told Reza that the letter actually gave him permission to keep selling the sweatshirts for 3 more months and to do PR for 2 weeks. Mask had essentially given him a window to capitalize on the moment. As Reza put it, if they were truly upset, they would have shut it down completely. The fact that they gave him time suggests they weren't entirely unhappy about the association either. By 2017, Mufti moved onto the runway at Copenhagen Fashion Week, shifting from hype-driven streetwear into full collections. With a growing focus on design and production, for his debut show, Reza used 2 massive Transport trucks as the backdrop. The same Fry whose logo had already appeared on his clothes as the Danish equivalent of Vitamins' famous DHL t-shirts. The trucks were fitted with oversized Mufti rims. It was theatrical, it was unexpected, and it was completely on brand. The brand was also stocked in some of the most prestigious luxury boutiques in the world. Atonia in Milan, Nichols in Shanghai, Bjørk Christensen in Copenhagen, and the clothes were being produced in the same factory as Gucci. Let that sink in. A man from the ghettos of Nørrebro, producing on the same level as one of the biggest luxury houses in the world. Then came 2018, and the moment that sent Mufti around the world. Days before Copenhagen Fashion Week, Demar passed his face-covering ban, what became known as the burqa ban, and Reza responded the only way he knew how, through his collection. His show featured Arabic slogan sweatshirts, hijabi models on the runway, and ended with niqab-wearing women handing bunches of flowers to models dressed as police officers. It was bold, it was political, it was exactly the kind of statement that the polished, minimal world of Scandinavian fashion rarely makes. The show was covered globally. Dazed, international outlets, the conversation went far beyond Copenhagen. And I want to give his full statement here because it is more nuanced than how it was reported. No man should be the judge of what a woman chooses to wear. We should not sanction a woman who neither threatens nor inflicts damage on others simply because of her garments. But he also made clear that he didn't have a one-sided view on the ban overall. He was not politically active, he had never been a member of a political party. What he was doing was not a political campaign, it was a human statement, and there's a big difference between the two. Behind the scenes, the business was facing pressures that the hype couldn't cover. The brand had gone from producing locally in Copenhagen to scaling up to international production. a massive investment that required infrastructure, capital, and systems that weren't yet fully in place. The global pandemic in 2020 hit the fashion industry hard, and in March 2021, Mufti was declared bankrupt with a deficit of 850,000 Danish kroners in its final financial year. As Reza said himself when confirming the bankruptcy, we went from being a small brand producing locally to an international brand with production abroad, and this is an enormous investment. It is one of the most honest summaries of what kills creative brands. Not the vision, not the talent, not the cultural impact. The gap between the creative ambition and the business infrastructure needed to hold it all together. What Mufti left behind, though, is impossible to dismiss. In the space of just a few years, a man with no formal fashion education, no industry connections, and no money built a brand that was stuck alongside some of the biggest names in luxury fashion, worn by Kendrick Lamar in '69, covered by American Vogue, and used a runway show to protest a government law in front of the entire international fashion press. That is not a failure, that is a legacy. This is The Slick Cut. Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I want to hear what you remember about Mufti. Like and subscribe, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.